According to Google, we are now on air. This is the e-learning 3.0 course, week number 6. And welcome, everyone. We've got 0 viewers so far. It always takes a little time for things to crank up. Okay, now we've got our first viewer. So hello, first viewer. Thank you for joining us. Now the numbers are going up, so that's nice. I'm Stephen Downs, and with me I have Viplav Baxi, who some of you may recall from our adventures in MOOCs a number of years ago, and I'm looking forward to talking with him about MOOCs, about recognizing, learning, about communities, resources, and everything in between. Before we get to that, I'd like to remind everybody that we have a survey for the course. It is a really short survey on SurveyMonkey, and we'd really appreciate it if you filled out that survey. It won't take you very long. It won't take you long at all, actually. And so here it is. Oops. Oh, it always does stuff like that to me. Why does it do stuff like that to me? There we go. So it'll take 10 minutes. What's sustaining this course is the research that we do. Kind of work for a research agency here. You helping us with this research is what makes stuff like this possible. That sounded like an NPR plug. Okay, I'm going to stop screen sharing now and present to everyone. But having put in that plug for the survey, we're in week 6 now of e-learning 3.0. Last week was the week I think people realized just how hard this course is. So I tried to make an easier assignment for this week with the creation of your own digital badge. I say easier, it took me a while to do it, so it might take you a little while to do it as well. Anyhow, I want to get to the main point of today's webcast. Viplav Baxi. Viplav, hello.
Hi, Stephen. Hi, everybody on the call today.
We're up to 4 viewers now.
Wonderful. Hi, 4 viewers.
And of course, as you know, as is always the case with these videos, we may have 4 viewers now, but we'll have many more viewers than that over time, because people do tend to prefer the recording over the live event. So I do have the back channel running as well. It might even be working today. It's always so hard to tell whether it's working. Oh well, there's a thing from Twitter coming in, so good. Looks like the back channel is working. So I want to introduce you, Viplav, to the viewers who might not know you. So currently, I'm having issues with my Windows. That's why I'm sort of pausing. Okay. Because it won't show up. There we go. Currently, you are working with Oxford University Press in India, right?
That's right.
Yeah. What are you doing with them?
So I had a product and digital transformation for the press in India, and essentially the kind of work is involved is in taking a lot of publishing courses that they build across K-12 and higher education, and converting them into digital content, interactive content, as well as building assessments and coding simulators, and the entire bunch of education technology implements that a publisher would need for its customers.
So you've been doing this for a couple of years now.
That's right. That's right.
So, but you have a storied history in learning in India and in e-learning generally. You had your own consulting company for a while, as I recall.
That's right. That's right. For the past about 25 years, I've been in the education technology space, done a wide variety of things, including simulations, serious games, gamification, a lot of work in MOOCs, starting with CCK08, of course, and a lot of work in assessments and competency development and so on and so forth. So, quite a diverse experience, both working for people and working for myself. I failed more than I have succeeded, but I like to feel that I've learned something out of what I've done, and it's been a great experience so far.
So are you involved in MOOCs or open online learning at all in your current position? It
Um,
seems
yeah, publishing is fairly industry that moves very slowly and steadily.
yes.
And MOOCs are a form of digital content that some publishers have really picked up. Online learning in a big way. Others haven't. But I like to think that publishing is like almost like EdTech. Publishing is a reflection of the system of education that we're serving.
Mhm.
So essentially, we have to ensure that mandates of curricula, mandates of pedagogy, or teaching styles or teaching modalities are generally obeyed. We respond to those and incrementally innovate, sometimes radically innovate, but largely incrementally innovate in that space. I think all edtech companies are doing the same thing. They
Mhm.
have to go with the rubrics of the system that they are serving at any point.
So the publishers are tightly tied to education policy in whatever country they're working in, and that would be the case in India as well now.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
So are you working for both higher level, like university level, as well as elementary school publications? I don't
That's
know if
correct.
OUP does.
We have both of these divisions that I work with. There's also a global academic division, which deals
Hmm.
with all the scholarly publications and academic publishing in general, which is journals and open journals and closed
Sure.
journals as well.
Are you being impacted by the open publishing mandates that some publishers, or sorry, some funders are imposing? For example, the Plan S in Europe. Is any of that impacting your work?
So far as the any mandate sort of turns the open way, yeah, I guess there would be some impact there.
Hmm.
It just depends on how the published works that we have for K-12 or for higher education are being adopted by schools and universities. If the local policy doesn't allow an external publish like it does in some cases,
Hmm.
then of course we can't work. If the open movement is strong and led by the government, it certainly has an impact on what we do.
Do you think an organization like, well, OUP and other publishers might move entirely to open publishing sometime in the future, or is there always going to be that commercial side?
OUP, for example, is department of the University of Oxford. So we are, in that sense, we are non-profit. We are enterprise which aims to be sustainable and maximize impact through the world through our publishing. So from our perspective, it is really trying to figure out the best kind of publishing we can for these markets. And the commercial is not really our aim, but of course there is a balance that we need to do between sustainability and completely open. Means
Are you seeing and I guess you are, I'm assuming you are you seeing the publications, the actual content of publications being tied to learning outcomes, or skills inventories or competency inventories or anything like that?
Insofar as every government or every system of education will have a blueprint for education that involves learning outcomes, learning
Mhm.
indicators, learning objectives, and so on and so forth. We have to do that. If we don't do that, then we are not really aligned to the local policy, local conditions um, in that country. But as far as going into more granular, competency frameworks, there are some
Mhm.
that we look at, like the CEFR or maybe the Common Core of the US. So we look at a few of those for sure, and keep compliant to them.
So what would compliance look like? Yeah, what would it look like? Is the do you have like a learning objective and then your content follows it directly and then an assessment is tied to that, or is it looser or
Typically like that. In some cases, it might be much looser than very exact science.
Mhm.
It depends from market to market. What is the level of granularity or precision that each market wants? But in general, we are informed by the say the national education policies, the what kind of curricular approach they put, which is both pedagogy and the syllabus.
Mhm.
So they're looking at so not just syllabus alignments that we have to perform, but also the method by which we conduct or transact the syllabus, which may include learning outcomes, it may include experiential play, learning with real life applications, activity based, and so on and so forth. So there might be a vast variety across different regions and countries.
And now, of course, in your position, you're focusing on the digitization of all of these learning resources.
That is correct, and using them for many different purposes. For example, one is straightforward interactive ebooks.
Mhm.
The others could be using assessment resources for creating tests on the fly for teachers to give to the students, things like that. So, trying to use what we have and making it accessible to the students and teachers via variety of different delivery methods is what we are trying to do.
One of the things that we learned, uh, George Siemens and myself and Dave and others, Jay Cross, when we visited you in India, is anytime we think something is big, take that, multiply it by 100, and you get India scale. Uh, so I imagine this is true of digital publishing right now. Is that right? Does that sound right?
It is. However, as you will understand that um, uh, the mainstay is textbooks and publishing through print, because that is what gets mediated in our classrooms. India is to a large extent a rural education enterprise. So almost 80% of our schools are rural. 20% are the urban schools. The population of the country is in the distributed over the tier 2 and tier 3 cities much more than tier 1 cities. Connectivity is an issue. You'll have power as an issue, right? Computing resources as an issue. So there isn't one size fits all solution, that we could provide with technology. But wherever technology is possible to implement, there are inroads being made, and you'll appreciate it's also a cultural change, a change of mindset, a change of process and technique of teaching and learning, as much as it is technology itself. You know,
So, how many ebooks does that translate to? Would you say?
hundreds of ebooks, all the titles that we do. Yeah, hundreds. Yeah.
Sure. And how many students would be using those ebooks? Rough guess.
So, in India, the population using this is very low so far with active usage. But the size of the market, the size of the audience is fairly large. So we 8 to 10 million students that we serve, but totally about 250 million students in India. The scale is very large. Even if you have half a fraction of 1% using electronic materials, it's still very large.
Yeah, exactly. That's the lesson that we learned.
Yeah.
Um, so, okay, it's digital ebooks mostly are they're not being used in learning management systems or MOOCs or anything like that. They're just standalone, aren't they?
Yes, and some of them are used as part of learning management systems within schools and colleges.
Mhm.
Universities take subscriptions out for some of these, but largely, yes, you're right. It's a standalone resource used in the classroom by the teacher for demonstration purposes and probably for test generation purposes and so on and so forth. That's how predominantly it is used. We have, of course, a fantastic integrated product in India, which sort of has a thematic approach, completely LMS based, being adopted very nicely by schools.
Mhm.
And there are many such offerings available in the Indian market, in South Asian market as well.
Is there a lot of community based, like I, I want to try to be clear here, online community kind of interaction, the sort of interaction that we talk about in MOOCs? Do you see that a lot in schools or in education generally?
No, no. Even in my past experience, even before I started working with Oxford, my effort was to build an online learning community for schools,
Right.
where teachers and students and parents and everybody could talk to each other and share ideas, thoughts in the ways we thought online digital collaboration should be, how connective learning should be.
Mhm.
And I came across many issues that led me to feel that the technology or the pedagogy is not the only thing, but how to get it down to a change in mindsets and beliefs and values, is a more difficult change that we have to envision. For example, some schools started telling us that please don't allow parents to use the forum um, directly because if one parent criticizes the school and it becomes visible even in the closed network, it is something that they don't desire. Or some schools even said, don't let our teachers write back any comments because we don't trust how they could formulate the. So there were many such non-technology, non-pedagogy kind of issues, which was really around trust, building identity, building trust, building self-regulation, self-organization. That mindset still is not something that is anywhere near dominant or even as part of education policy. And India has a rich heritage in terms of trying out these educational community portals, but we haven't really succeeded in the past.
So that would be, I'm assuming here then, a large part of the reason why you wrote your recent book, What If
That's
Education?
right. That's right.
May- Maybe you can tell us a bit about the book.
Yes, and What If EDU is a book that's going to be released in hopefully in December this year. And what I've done with the book is try to systematically break down the system of education that we have into different areas, aspects. And thanks, Stephen, for bringing up the site here. So I started with a set of questions. I said, what if teachers made students laugh, or what if teachers could play online games with students, or what if the school day was not divided into fixed periods, but we could have variable scheduling, batch scheduling, and so on and so forth, or like the ones Stephen was talking. So there were so many of these questions that started coming. There were nearly about 30, 35 of these questions that came out. And started posting them on LinkedIn. And to my delight, a lot of people started writing in back to those questions and started saying, yeah, this seems to be an interesting question to ask. And since I'm intrinsically a troublemaker, so I thought I'll put those put those all in one book, curate them, put them in a book, and then start embellishing them with more and more experiences of people from across the world. So if there's somebody following, a type of batch scheduling, I'd put them there. If somebody is following a project-based learning environment methodology for the school, I put that there. So I discovered so many beautiful experiences people have had, so many experiments people are trying to undertake with varying degrees of success, and a lot of research across the world in these areas. So I've asked provocative questions for people to answer, and it's a book without solutions. So you won't find. I've tried very hard not to say this. This is what I feel, because that's not the point of the book. And Stephen, you've read a couple of those chapters as well, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I wish I could have done more to help out with that, but it looked like a really interesting project to me.
Yes, it is. It's great fun. It's great fun writing it, and I'm hoping it will start that community that will start talking about and questioning existing practices. If we can, and credentialing was one of them. So um, I have this vision of the degree breaking up, or the school living certificate breaking up into these small badge-like implements. And how could we actually start looking at even things like stealth assessments? Something that Valerie Shoot at I think she's at the University of Florida. She's working on how can games be used to stealthily assess performance at different levels. Um, that's something very exciting for me, because I think that for a lot of us, if assessments were made implicit, like in some ways learning is also implicit, how could we actually go ahead and derive some really actionable insights about students using that? So I'm very excited about breaking down credentials. Um, I also strongly believe that our system of education produces credentials rather than well-developed holistic individuals, right? So it's a factory system, not for developing citizens, but it's for developing, getting the marks in place, manufacturing marks. So if that could be changed, if that paradigm could be changed in some way, what if we could do something like that? And then there's experiences of different people like Badger, or Reddy, and other people who have tried to do something like this. Open badges from Mozilla Foundation as well.
Have you been working with badges directly at all?
Not yet, although I've had opportunity to study them in some detail because I was writing this book chapter, but haven't really. In the Indian context, I don't think you'll find many people working in badges in the Indian context as such. And the understanding around badges is fairly loose. Um, uh, Only now with international players like Udacity coming in, or Coursera coming in, there's some understanding of what a badge can do, or what a badge can mean, and what it would look like if it was given to you by lynda.com, just LinkedIn badge on you. But our traditional large scale recruitment platforms don't have badges on them like that. So that's something which is interesting.
So what are the large scale recruitment platforms in India?
So there's one called Naukri.com, which is like huge, humongous. It's been around forever. It's got millions and millions of resumes and solutions for corporates to actually search through them through various kind of combinations where people have worked before, what's their number of years of experience, what kind of projects they worked on, and so on and so forth. And
How
now,
do you
if
spell that?
it's called Naukri, which means in English a job, but it's spelled as Naukri.
NAUKRI.com. Glad I asked. I never would have guessed that.
So that's Monster is also fairly large in India. So there are many such recruitment firms and portals, and I think they are one natural consumer of badges.
Yeah.
I think that's really a good way to look at badges from that side.
And you mentioned Lynda as well, which of course is tied to LinkedIn.
Yes, that's right. And so if you can get direct badges from Coursera into LinkedIn, or from Lynda into LinkedIn, or from Udacity into LinkedIn, it becomes a way of signifying certain kind of accomplishment and things like that, which is really good. I think it just should be democratized a bit, and also should be popularized in a structured fashion, because I don't think the formal degree is going to go away, and therefore that credentialing that is really signaling readiness for the next level of work or of learning. So that credentialing system is hardly going to change. But in the professional learning space, that might gain its own currency, which it has in some ways as well, because people are saying we completed this course from Coursera or that from Udacity or something like that.
When you say democratized a bit, what do you mean by that exactly?
So, for example, if I was to run a course and if I was to give my badge at some point, today I have the tools to do it, but I don't have an understanding and an awareness or even a basic level acceptance within say an Indian context, where an employer would say, all right, here's Viplav, he's done some work in badges, he's certified that the person's taken his course and is now competent in looking at badges. Now, it all depends on how the system is structured, and does Viplav sort of become a rated certifier, credential giver? How does Viplav get to that stage? How does Viplav emerge as an expert in that? That identity of Viplav as an expert in badging, how does that emerge? All that that ecosystem is yet not ready from the output side. People don't understand badges, and therefore the supporting ecosystems is very, very weak at this point. People have tried definitely for these kind of things, but haven't really succeeded.
I can definitely relate to the idea that people don't understand it from the output side. It's been a mystery to me for a long time, oddly enough, and people sort of express surprise when I say that, but it does take stopping and sitting down and figuring this out, and they talk about things like baking badges and stuff, which is utterly mysterious, unless, until you figure out what it could possibly mean.
Right. And the funny thing is, if I was to look at say 1,000 management institutes in India, each of them loosely follows the curriculum given by the government or by the regulatory body. But I can't say for sure that the MBA that Institute A gives me is the same as the MBA that Institute B gives me. It will never be the same. There will be that chaos and that creativity at the individual institute level. But at the end of the day, an MBA from Institute A is, and stands at par with MBA from Institute B. So at some point, we'll have to have ways of really, really objectively credentialing people. I think this system doesn't work for me. It's never worked for anybody. Even our big IT companies in India say that not more than 8 to 10% of our engineers are employable, and so forth. So those are obvious problems with the existing system, and we need a new system. The problem is we haven't started thinking about what a new system could look like, and what kind of institutional structures or democratic structures have to be created in order to make that happen.
Well, let's play what if for a few moments.
Sure.
What would it look like? I have my thoughts, but your perspective is going to be very different, I'm sure. What would work? Both in the professional context, but also in the context of the wider community.
I think for the professional context, guilds or networks of practice. So, especially in their area, it could be accounting and finance, it could be IT and programming, it could be education, for example. But these are people who are committed towards furthering knowledge and proficiency in those areas, and there are plenty of these institutions. If they were only to come together and act as, and they be given, if they are given by the government or by the local authorities some kind of credibility, so that their credentials or badges can act as currency in the job market. That's something that I think is really important. I think if individuals who are very well respected, if they can come forward and start some of these things, that's going to be very useful as well. There could be variety of things. There could be, as I discuss in my book as well, alternate structures. So you could have ownership instead of being controlled by the government or by a private company or trust. It could be actually governed collectively by the parents and by the teachers, by the local community itself. And so there could be many different ways to skin the cat, and um, some could work in in some part of India or the world, and some could work in other parts of India and the world. Very interesting to explore alternative structures there.
Um, so I guess I can think of examples similar to what you're proposing, like, for example, certified general accountants manage accounting training, and
Mhm.
the Bar Association for lawyers,
Yes.
and medical associations. But do you think that would work in disciplines where there might be less honesty?
Yeah, so they'll all have to go through some level of objective credentialing somewhere.
Hmm.
And I don't mean prescriptive. I mean things that can possibly be made available to allow them to govern themselves properly. And
Mhm.
then a system that balances it out. So if there is some problem, then somebody is not doing the right thing, then a way to eliminate that. So over time, it's not something that can happen immediately, but over time, I'm sure it can. We can look at creating a fairer society, a more objective society than we have right now.
So, what would objectivity and assessment look like?
I think it should be an agreed set of competencies, skills, and sub-skills. Like we have done we've got, for example, for vocational education, like in many other countries, you've got the national skills framework or qualification framework. And we know for every profession at each level what is the basket of skills that are required and
Mhm.
at what level of ability that those skills are there. So people have started aligning onto standards. There's a CEFR standard for English. There's so many different standards all across. This Common Core or the NGSS in the US now. If we can agree as agree on a set of principles, guiding principles, then it should be fairly easy to define who conforms to it and who doesn't conform to it. Um,
And these would be again applied to the actual assessment of individuals as well through what, some sort of testing, or how would that work?
um, at some point, in cases where you need to demonstrate a level of skill, um, we'll have to definitely use some kind of a test instrument to make that objectively verifiable or independently verifiable by some other. Um, at some point, we'll have to rethink how we are doing our assessments. So today, the
Mhm.
basic deficiency in doing assessments is death by multiple choice, right? We have this elaborate systems of multiple choice questions or fill in the blanks, just short answer questions, and so on and so forth, which may be singularly unsuited for actually deriving a measure of competency in many
Right.
ways. We're trying to do a STEM project and we're saying we can't use MCQs because you have to figure some way of doing scalably a way to determine if there is creativity, if this critical thinking happening. These are all such difficult concepts to do, um, but we have managed to linearize everything into the multiple choice.
Mhm.
And at some point, innovation has to happen there. So if you have a competency or a skill or a sub skill that you want to measure in some way, perhaps it requires an instrument which is very specialized and very reliable, which helps you evince that skill or competency. But you can't just have the same way to measure everything.
Do you see
It's
that
not an
as,
easy question.
yeah, no, it's not an easy question. That's why I asked it. Do you see that as a role for publishers in the future, designing these instruments?
They have, in fact, quite a few publishers have looked at next generation methods for testing. And for example, I think in the US, about 7 states had gotten together and said, for let's put games and simulations inside our standardized tests.
Right.
Right, and that's one improvement. So you could look at a complex game and make it your assessment. So you could have maybe your year-end assessment on World of Warcraft or something like that. So you could create different environments, which in some cases you can't avoid having a very precise output and a very specific way of getting to do this. If you're a crane operator, there's a particular way in which you'll have to operate the crane, otherwise you can't really do your
Sure.
job.
But how many of us are crane operators?
Exactly. Yeah. So we need to work a lot in terms of figuring out what the next generation assessments are going to be. And if I recall correctly, this is where we also stopped in our CCK 08 days. We talked about how to measure output of
Right.
competency or achievement, and there's lively discussion around that. I don't think we have the answer to that. Um, the traditional system has an answer to that, which doesn't work, but it has an answer. you
Yeah,
know,
that's kind of like mowing the lawn on the driveway because it's easier. There's no grass to get in the way.
there you go. So it is
Yeah,
there. We have to present an alternative, and we have to make sure that that alternative is easy enough for people to grasp and to implement over a period of time. So yeah, it's a very tough question to answer.
so after the CCK days, the early MOOCs, George Siemens, as you know, then went into an exploration of learning analytics.
Hmm.
Um, and so that, of course, would involve the use of artificial intelligence or machine learning or some such thing
Yeah.
to assess a person's progress through learning materials. Do you see that playing a role in these new assessments?
I think very much so. Artificial intelligence is going to play a huge role in scaling up the human intuition in some ways, as far as possible. It's evolving. It will mature. It wasn't like this 10 years back. It was really clumsy to do something intelligent using a machine. Today, it's slightly easier to do that. You are able to train algorithms in ways that they are also self-learning algorithms, um, which is good, which is all good. So, for example, you want to try grading an essay about 10 years back. It was really tough to do that. Today, it's slightly simpler. May not be completely accurate, but it's simpler to do, or even think of doing something. 10 years hence, it will be. My sense is that's how it will be done. For grading, you will require machine learning for sure in subjective situations as well.
Now, with an artificial intelligence grading an essay, I have looked at this, as I'm sure you have. Uh, what the AI does is basically a categorization task. It looks at examples of previously graded essays, and so you have a pile of essays that are A, B, C, D. And it looks at that data, and then it looks at a new essay, an essay to be graded, and basically it's deciding which pile should this essay go into. The trick with that, though, is if you ask the AI, why did you put it in this pile rather than that pile, it might not have an answer.
Yeah, and maybe these algorithms today are based on classification. Maybe tomorrow we have some other kind of interesting way to look at this in terms of maybe even saying what does location have to do with a particular way an answer is made. Maybe it will do very well for very simple answers, factual answers to start with. Maybe we start there. You know, of course, there'll be like three different ways of handling a subjective answer. So um,
Sure.
today, at this, if you look at it from our current set of evaluation procedures, it's not going to be very different, because I think they'll be probably as accurate as what our teachers do.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, I think that's
on a
true.
very general thing. So And I've seen examples of that. So I wouldn't want to have the perfect technology, but something that can scale, um, and have a degree of confidence in those results. I'm okay with that to start with.
Mhm. Can you imagine an environment where you're just doing stuff online and an artificial intelligence is watching you and says, "Oh, that person deserves a badge," and you get a badge even though you weren't looking for one?
Um, if leaving, sorry, leaving the separating. I'm separating all the privacy concerns. So I'm keeping that separate.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
because that's his own game out there. But if you look at machine being able to identify what you're good at, I think it might be very useful in certain circumstances, because you may have certain latent traits or latent behaviors that allow you to do something much better than anybody else.
Yeah.
And if somebody can guide you, and that's what I think what our mentors do, right? So the mentors are able to see what we are doing, see how the passion with which we are doing something, the grit with which we are doing something, and then suggest to us that maybe this is something that you would want to do for life. And if that kind of a system, if AI can be used to do something like that, that would be very interesting.
Because I can imagine, and this is sort of what I'm thinking of as the next generation of MOOCs, uh, like our MOOCs, not
Yeah,
Coursera or
yeah,
edX, right?
yeah.
Um, so it's a very informal environment where people just jump into the MOOC and participate however they want. They may contribute tasks, or they may complete tasks or whatever. And then the idea would be that the MOOC, they're participating in it. So the question of volunteering to be observed is addressed, and then the MOOC would automatically assign them badges just based on their informal interactions. Um,
Yes, and this could be helped by a lot by the teachers themselves.
mhm.
Um, if you look at the formal education system, I'm not sure in how much of data is actually captured by the teacher of the learner, the style the learner follows, the steps she takes to achieve competency or mastery in a particular competency, and so on and so forth. How well is that really documented? Is the learning trail very visible, or is it very
Mm.
sparse, or is just left in the teacher's head when the school year ends? Um, Teachers could play an amazing role in capturing these episodes or incidents or events that they see as being critical to the learning success, or be responsible for the learning failures, for example. Um, so, if they could help train with their insight, with their intuition about students, to train machines to do some of that work, perhaps we might get a very, very good way of doing what you're saying.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of exactly that, but yeah, I think that's a good idea. Um, I'm not sure teachers would want to train machines to do the sort of recognition thing that they're doing, but I'm sure, but then again, it frees them up to do more helpful, more useful things, working directly with students rather than
Yes,
just.
yeah, I steer clear of the technology replacing teacher kind of debate. Is for me, it is very, it's not a debate that's worth having. Uh, I think teachers should use technology to help themselves get better.
Hmm.
To get intelligence on what they are doing and how they could do things better, and how could they inform other teachers, their peers, their colleagues, anywhere across the world, how to do things better. And that for any self-respecting teacher or any professional is really important.
So for improvement purposes, as opposed to evaluative purposes, I would think. I'm
Absolutely.
thinking,
or
yeah,
or or you don't want to say, you don't want to have a school principal or administrator kind of saying, yeah, your learning path and their learning path is different, and you should improve learning paths here. And you don't want that. It's not for that. It's for helping your students, for helping your parents to understand how the students operate, and so on and so forth. Another way, I think, very interesting way in which this technology could help us is if I could find somebody to teach me the way I would like to learn from that person. So
Hmm.
doing the matching between teachers and students, I think that could be very important. And for that also, data has to be visible to some computing environment or intelligent environment behind the scenes. So taking the privacy issues aside, uh, this could really help.
That would help interactions in general, actually, not just teaching interactions. But if you're going into a business negotiation with someone, you had this kind of thing, it would teach you how to interact with that other person.
That's a big skill. That's a really big skill to
It is a big skill. Yeah, it's one I'm really bad at. So I know it's a big
have.
skill. Reading the person, knowing the person's background, how they like to work, things like that, and then coming in and interacting with them so that, you know, yeah, that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's something teachers do every day with 30 or 40 kids.
yeah. It's
Um,
it's, it's it's quite incredible. And they
mhm,
do a fantastic job, I would
yeah,
say.
salespeople do that too.
Yes, they do that as well. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I imagine sales training focuses a lot on that. You must be involved in sales training as well, materials for sales training.
Yes, for the internal teams, yeah, for our own salespeople. But there's also specialized firms that deal with training, and they use things like simulations, for example.
Hmm.
Um, there are people who do simulations for flight instructor, for flying, for pilot licenses, and for
Yeah.
medicine and robotic surgeries and so on and so forth. And I think there's a lot to learn from some of those systems in terms of being able to, with great amount of fidelity, be able to capture evidence of ability in a competency. So I think
I've,
very
yeah.
useful.
I've always liked the idea of simulations, but they're so expensive to build, which is a real issue. That's probably a future for publishers, the simulation building for sure. It makes
Yeah.
so much more sense than books, right? Books are the sort of thing that they're easily reproduced and actually almost easily created. Simulations, you need some higher order skills to build one of those, especially an open
Yeah.
ended simulation.
Yeah, and the some of that is happening through chatbots now. Because
Hmm.
we used to build role play simulations, and those were like simple multiple choice branching, um,
Yeah, I've
you
never been
know,
a fan of
graphs,
branching
and
simulations.
and it was a limitation at that time because a few years back it was limitation,
Yeah.
which doesn't exist today because now you have chatbots who can take you through really a system, with the help of a system that is really learning behind the scenes. Um, it's a very good development. I think we should really work very strongly on AI and try to use it not to solve humanity's problems with education, but to solve smaller problems that are more tractable and in the short term can be implemented very easily.
Maybe that's what I should be adding to my MOOCs, chatbots, and chatbots that not only
Yes,
teach you, they also tell you where you've gone wrong.
that's right. That's right. And we can explore it. So, for example, the idea of a personal learning network. What if I had,
Mhm.
an AI bot that was helping me connect with newer people every day, with whom I would have an affinity, or I would learn from based on my interests, and keep on
Sure.
expanding my PLN. Start, refining the kind of content that comes in through the filtering mechanisms, the feed forward mechanisms that you've built with Grasshopper, for example. So
Mhm.
how are those things going to be helped by machine learning is really important for us to look at.
And if it's a personal learning system, then the problem of surveillance is kind of avoided because it's like
Yes,
you surveilling yourself.
yes, except yeah, you could possibly generate a large amount of data, but you would, I think, benefit very well by sharing your personal data, maybe in an anonymized form, so that everybody else could also benefit.
Sure.
So, if Viplav makes a connection to Stephen for a particular requirement or purpose, is that purpose visible in some sort of an anonymized way to other people or to the algorithm itself? I think those are things that are important to look at.
Yeah, because you're not going to learn just by looking at your own performance in isolation. It's
Yeah.
I tried to learn darts that way, just by playing by myself, and
Right. Right.
you can go a certain point, but eventually you have to play other people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Right.
So we're almost out of time here, I think. So I really want to thank you for joining me for this interesting discussion about content and assessments. And have I missed anything important?
No, I don't think so. It's such a vast topic. I think we could just go on talking about it. So I'll try
Yeah.
and push a lot of those things into the documentation we have for this course, and try and send across some links that I found useful myself when I was reading.
Oh, that would be really helpful. I'll definitely pass those along.
Perfect.
And I'll also pass along the link to What If Education, What If EDU, because I'm sure people will be interested in seeing that too.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your help.
Thank you very much for joining us, Viplav, and thank you to the viewers that we've had throughout this conversation. It was nice having you with us, even though I didn't check your chat comments in the back channel because I'm really bad at it. I get absorbed in the conversation. I need a back channel checker to jump in sometime.
It's another role. It's an important role, yes.
Yeah, I'm glad I don't have an AI assessing. Okay, so I'm going to call it a close. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time. And of course, don't forget to fill out the survey. We really need your feedback. Thank you very much. I'm Stephen Downs.
Thank you, and Viplav. Bye.
And